So right now we're going over the new residential listing agreement for California. So if you're selling homes, whether you're a realtor or you're the home seller, you probably want to watch this video because it's changed things dramatically. So first of all, date prepared, you always want to get that in there so you can identify this RLA, and you want to see the most recent one. This one pertains to 7/24. If there's a new one in the future, and I think there's damn well should be, make sure you're seeing my videos on the new one or talking to a lawyer about it. I'm a lawyer and a broker in California. Been a lawyer since 91, a broker since 2004. When I first got started those first few years, I was defending brokers from lawsuits. So I was very familiar with these. Now, as I said, listing period as short as possible, 30 days or less, 2 weeks or less, because what's happened is realtors can no longer make unilateral offers of compensation, so they don't even know if they're going to be able to sell your home. It's not like it used to be. Now, just to show you that I'm not joking, let me just say let me go down here. We'll come back to this in a minute. But here, the broker compensation advisory form is now automatically part of the software attached. And when we spin down to this thing, I'm sorry, it's pretty far down, you're going to see that in the broker compensation advisory, down here in broker compensation advisory, look at this. They give you a little history about how normally you can make a co-broke and you'd make a unilateral offer, which means you're saying ahead of time, I'll be paying 2% or 3% or $20,000 or $30,000 to the buyer's agent. You used to be able to do that. CAR is now saying that their listing agreement forms no longer provide for such offers of broker compensation commission at all. There's no thing that says I'm going to pay buyers 2%. This is just an agreement where the listing agent is saying, I'd like to get paid for the work. You'd like me to help you sell your home. This is what you're going to pay. There's no, and how much are we paying the buyer's agents? It's not here. Now, additionally, this is cool because I think Carl is watching my videos. There's no form for your listing agent to ask you about about making offers of compensation. They can't negotiate with you ahead of time how much you want to pay buyers because they don't even have a form for it. They shouldn't create a form because they're not lawyers. They're not licensed to do it. Some realtors don't even have high school educations. I've met plenty of smart brokers that could certainly do it, but they're not licensed to do it because offering compensation to buyers is now fraught with so many problems, from steering to price fixing to antitrust violations to compromising fiduciary agents, that it's too complicated for realtors to do this. They can't create the waivers, they can't create the acknowledgments, they can't advise you of the risks so you can make rational choices. So CAR's choices, let's just not have any forms where listing agents discuss with sellers how they're going to compensate buyer's agents. That's going to have to be done at a request of the buyer's agent. So presumably, some offers will come over with requests for compensation of the buyer's agents, which you as a seller can turn down. So it's a stunning development. And let me now just go back and try to speed up through the important parts here. Now, so this says, as a listing agent, I might charge, let's just say 2%. We'll put in 2 instead of 10,000. And I would like an extra $7,000. Let's say $5,000 if the buyer does not have an agent at all. Buyers require a lot of work. They require a lot of handholding. They get cold feet. Sometimes they disappear. They ghost you while they're all nervous. They don't like their inspections. They don't know how to read it. They don't know what's going on. I'm going to tell you right now, for my sellers, so that we can, some degree, get around buyer's remorse. Buyers are worried when they don't have someone protecting them that you're going to screw them. When the listing agent is working with the selling agent, they're worried that they're going to get ripped off. They get cold feet. So I'm going to say, look, I'm getting some of this money, and I'm going to tell all buyers that we're going to have $2,000 or whatever in the transaction to make sure that they're protected. There's going to be money for an attorney who's experienced or an agent so they get someone on their team so they can feel good and strong about their forms and their offers. And I'm also going to use some of that money to make sure there's a transaction coordinator, because there's so many questions that buyers have about forms, and they're calling the transaction coordinator. When they're not filling them out, the transaction coordinator is going to write them. And he's going to be seeing somewhat independently of me. So when I'm selling homes and the buyer is not going to be represented, we're going to discuss this number with you. Let's say it's $7,000 or $10,000 or 1%, whatever we determine is fair, and we negotiate. And some of that money, like I said, is going to go to an attorney. Some of it's going to a transaction coordinator. Just because I know I've done this. We've done this. Now, what if in dual agency, that's where your listing agent, as I did sometimes, as a dual agent where I've represented the buyer. I think there's excellent reasons to have dual agency, but with dual agency, the side compensation shall be specified in a separate written agreement. Now, I might negotiate that with you ahead of time. I'm an attorney, and I think I can do it. It's going to be really odd if I ask for money on a case-by-case basis from a buyer. Oh, guess what? I had an open house. I've got a buyer. The buyer's coming in, and they're making $1 million offer, which is exactly what you're asking, but I'd like another $20,000. I could blow up the deal because you don't want to pay me $20,000. I don't see any way I could do that ahead of time. I think you and I would hopefully agree to a compensation level ahead of time. I'd attach it, and then you get to review that concept. It might work better, though, for us all together. We'll have to see how this goes. If we just get a separate number here, and I agree out of that number, I put a lawyer or pay a buyer a percent to represent, no, not represent, but to advise a buyer. This dual agency thing's a mess. I don't like this form at all as it goes, but I'm sure I'll get used to it, or people will get used to it over time. I don't like these periods of time. They should be short. And even if your agent did the work, if they couldn't get the closing done, let's say it's more than 30 days, then you can't keep track of that forever. But, it's negotiable. Going back to this term, it should be very short. If your agent says, but for the MLS, then go and you're right, the 24-hour consolation. If they say, but I'm going to spend $5,000 on a glossy magazine, well, then that might be written in like, if you want to cancel after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, or before that, you might pay the $5,000. After that, maybe a percentage of it. But you cannot agree to a long listing agreement in most circumstances in California right now. Things are changing too fast. There's the broker compensation. There's other advisories that could be added. Back in the short sale days or REOs, that's bank owned. Trust advisory. This comes up a lot in my practice. Probates or people selling from trusts out of a will. This comes up a lot. So if it's there, make sure you're attaching the trust advisory. Addenda. I imagine there's going to be a lot of addenda since things are changing. Here's where you get advised. Now, again, you've already specified you're shortened this out. I don't think we need to cover these as much right now. Seller, you're agreeing that you're not going to owe money to another listing agent. Your new agent's not going to owe money to an old agent. Maximum listing period is 24 months. Like I said, it should be like 2 weeks renewable, in my opinion, right now, while this is getting fleshed out. Seller further agrees to indemnify defendant, hold broker harmless. Now, there's parts where Carr, and I agree, advises people to do a good walk through their home so they know and they disclose in good faith. I think it's very important. If you're working with me, when we're doing our disclosures, we go over these things. I say walk through with the eyes of a buyer, not the seller, and I explain why. So those things are important. Unrepresented buyer. If a buyer is interested in viewing seller's property is not already represented by a real estate broker, and such buyer refuses to be represented by a broker, and some do. A lot of buyers hate buyer's agents and hate agents. And more, they're not going to want to locked in with these new stupid forms Carr's forcing on people. So seller author on brokers, they're terrible, and we'll go over the buyer form in the next video. Broker to obtain a signed document for such buyer refusing representation. Yeah. Brokers shall provide such buyers at earliest possible time. Yeah, this is true. But I want the buyers to come in and see your property. I'm not going to force them to sign any forms. I want them to see the property. We're not going to force them on it. If they want to make offers, I'm going to go over their options. And I'll go over with you and see what options I should offer them to help protect you. Because I'm working for you, at least in the beginning, dual agency, that I'm working for both. But you're going to be well advised ahead of time. Lots of photographs are usually better, but maybe you put one photograph up and lack of information, or the least amount possible, so the buyers contact your listing agent if that's the strategy you want to employ, but most likely the more pictures, the better. You can opt out of lock boxes and signs, attorney's fees. I would be careful about this. It dovetails with the mediation thing. I would follow the forms. Entire agreement, good thing. Remainder is blank. This is just when LLCs and corporations are selling things, seller's signature. So that's it for the listing agreement. We got it done a little more than 10 minutes. Nice. The BCA, I covered some of it earlier. It's fully negotiable. Buyers unrepresented. This is that new term, where I think it's fair. Some listing agents, it might be something you really want to opt into. Like that might be the method you want. You'll be protected by offering compensation to buyers to be protected. They'll be protected by having an attorney. It's probably a very good model. Dual agency is going to be more difficult. Maybe not as difficult if it's broker, and in my brokerage, I've got multiple buyer's agents. So there's a buyer agent working with the buyer and a separate listing agent. My brokerage working with you. That's what we're going to probably have to pre-negotiate or talk about what the expected terms are. Of course, I believe you could probably always cancel them. Buyer representation. This is telling you, hey, if you're getting an offer and the offer's for $1 million and you like the $1 million, but they're asking for 2%, you don't want to pay a buyer broker, it's fully negotiable. And I totally endorse that. Everything needs to be in writing these days in California if you want it to stick. Here's the information. This is good education. When enlisting a real estate broker to represent them, buyers agree to pay the buyer's broker when escrow closes, but the person responsible for payment may be negotiated. Well, I'm going to tell you that's according to NAR in these forms. That's not the rule in California, right? So I think eventually many buyers or agents are not going to be NAR members anymore and use different forms and not be tied down by that owner's agreement. That I don't think any buyer should sign, and I don't think buyer's agents should force on their people. And we're going to go back to this law. A listing agent and a selling agent may agree to share a compensation or commission paid. So this might not always apply. So be careful with this. If you're a seller, make sure your agent understands that some buyers might not want to work with those forms, and some buyers' agents may opt out of them in the future. And there's going to be pressure on the MLS to allow it. There's already a class action suit in Michigan on that, I was told. Seller pays the compensation. Buyer agent negotiates agreement directly with seller. So these are ways that compensation can change. It's very important to read, but we already covered this. There's no more unilateral offer of compensation forms for buyer's agents. For seller's agents. And this is vital for a seller. So I frankly, if you're trying to sell your home and it's not going to sell in the first week or two, I don't see how you can be working with a typical buyer's agent, a listing agent. I just don't see how you can get away without making unilateral offers of compensation. I don't get it. A FSBO could do it. How could a seller not do it? So you're going to need to be working where there's an agent who's working under an attorney broker who can advise you on how to do this properly and has the forms, has the protections in place, and advises you of the risk. And it will be in writing. This is just crazy. There's no forms for you to discuss buyer agent compensation with the listing agent. This is because there's not lawyers in the transaction. If there were lawyers in transaction, you're going to get around the class action lawyer problems, in my opinion, and you certainly can get around the steering concerns of the DOJ, and you can get around the compromising of the buyer's agents, fiduciary duties to buyer's agents, if you're done properly, especially if they're well advised. So this term, this part of the agreement is full employment for lawyers. All right. Thank you, John McConnin, winnerscheck.com for more information. And if you are trying to contact us quickly, you can go to flatfeeadvantage.com and just fill out a form, and we'll get in touch with you. We've got a really cool AI that will respond quickly and set up a quick consult with us over the phone. All right, thanks. My name is John McConnin. Talk to you later. Happy home selling.